Yeah, so there's so much I feel like I've uncovered on my journey in self-development and mindset and spirituality and being really um, enveloped in these industries over the past however many years. What I've started to realize is that there's a lot of rigidity and a lot of schools of thought of like, this is the way to do it and this is how it has to be, especially in like the masculine and feminine dynamics and the polarity spaces. And so something that I've been really working on has just been to feel into what feels actually true for me in my body and come back home to that and what feels right. And yeah, not feeling like I have to just fit in one box because that's what my teachers have said or my mentors have said or that's what I've read on Instagram and people that I look up to or have said, right? I just think that there's a lot of rigidity around how things are supposed to be or how we're supposed to act, or we're supposed to be so feminine, or the masculine's supposed to be the leader and the provider. And I don't know. There's a part of me that's just ready to break out of all of those boxes at the moment.
It creates more problems than it solves in some ways, because you're like, oh wait, but I'm supposed to be like this all fucking time. So then I can't allow myself to be this way because
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be this divine feminine or whatever it is. And it's like
Yeah.
you lose
Yeah.
touch with reality sometimes because you're trying to fit into a box of Instagram coaching culture, whatever the fuck started that. I don't know.
I know. Yeah, well, it's like we want to change our life so much, so that's why we get into this work, right? It's like we want to have impact. We want to impact our own lives. We want to be our best selves. We want to self-actualize, whatever the language is, right? And it's like we trade one box for another. And that's what I think I've started to realize is, I definitely changed my life in so many ways through doing this work. But then I went from thinking that I had to be one way, right? That like quintessential idea that we have when we grow up, which is climb the ladder, do the things, check the boxes, get married, go get a good job, you go to college, right? You do the steps and then you will be happy. And what I've realized through doing so much of this work is it's this, right? I broke out of a lot of the, I guess, what you would call the matrix ideals of like I started my own business and I walked down this path of self-development and I started to do things that were unconventional and then I started again looking at, okay, what's the thing that's going to make me feel fulfilled and happy? And I'm going to get into polarity, and then I want to be into my feminine. Okay, then I'm going to get into spirituality, and then I feel like I have to be this like buttoned up spiritual, like evolved version of myself. And I'm just starting to come home to the fact that like, listen, I'm human, and sometimes I'm going to be this way, and sometimes I'm going to be that way. And I just realized I traded one box for another, and I think a lot of people do that, and we don't talk about it in this industry enough because there's so much of like we have to be this way and this is what's going to make you happy and fulfilled. And I just think breaking out of that whole paradigm is really beautiful and something that I'm leaning into right now.
I fucking love it. I have this belief that it's like, I don't know, people are looking for certainty so much, so when somebody says something with certainty on Instagram, it's like you just grasp it. And even, like I've even played with this where I'll say something and then I'll say one day and I'll look at the engagement. I'll say the exact same thing, but I'll put maybe in there and it's like not nearly as much. Or I say sometimes and it's not nearly as much, but that's the reality of it. Instead of this definite, this is how it is. And it's just interesting. And I think tying in, because I know you do so much work on the nervous system, when somebody's dysregulated, they're looking for safety, and certainty will create that. And so, at least cognitively, we think so. So it's like, oh, that's it. Okay, cool. I can relax into this box. But like you said, you're just box jumping, and you're not. You're still in a fucking box.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, when people don't have safety within themselves, they look for certainty outside of themselves. Right? It's a natural human thing that we do because we want to feel safe and secure. But naturally, being a human being is being in the nature of uncertainty. That is, no matter what, you cannot take that away. You do not know what is going to happen to you tomorrow, next week. You could walk out your door and something happen, right? Like being here, we're literally on a floating rock that's hurling through space and no one has any actual idea what is going on. So by definition, being a human is being uncertain. And so what do we do with that? instead of looking outside of ourselves, which we are conditioned to do from a very young age, right? Look outside of ourselves for certainty, for the answers. And we are going to calibrate to the frequency of someone else being certain unless we are able to feel certainty within ourselves, not because we can predict the future, but because we can find safety here in the present moment now. And that's really the work that I do.
What's your relationship like with uncertainty personally?
Ever evolving, very human.
Yeah.
Depends on the day. Right? I think in order to have a relationship, I mean, it's real. Like, in order to have a relationship with uncertainty, we have to have a relationship with surrender and with trust. And I think my relationship with uncertainty has evolved in the sense that for many years of my life, when I was quote unquote unconscious, which I don't like to say that, but before I got into this work, right? I was very much gripping for certainty, gripping for predictability. And the way that I did that was through very unpredictable means, which was drug and alcohol abuse, which was getting into not so good relationships, right? It didn't actually create certainty for me, but I was just gripping. I couldn't be with what is. I couldn't be with the uncertainty of what was. And I also couldn't be with my feelings in the present moment. And so when we're trying to grip so much, it's because we're trying to not allow ourselves to feel, and we're not letting ourselves feel what is there, right? So it's not the uncertainty that we're afraid of, it's the feeling that the uncertainty brings, right? So the fear or of the unknown, or like I think a lot of it is fear. A lot of it is it could be shame about the past. Like, there's just so much that can come up in the unfolding. And I think as I've started to learn how to feel my feelings, learn how to regulate my nervous system, it's like nothing has changed outside of myself, right? Being human is still uncertain, but when I get activated in moments of circumstances not going my way, or being in the unknown, whether that be business or relationships, or things that are happening outside of myself, it's like, okay, how can I pause and breathe into this feeling that's happening in my body and name it and be with it, and then relax into trust and surrender, and notice when I go into story, right? There's so many times when we feel uncertain, we're going into story. We're going into like trying to predict the future, or feeling some certain way about the past. We're not in the present. We're not in our body, and we're not in what we're feeling. And so for me, it's not about not having the activation around uncertainty, but when I feel that, can I create space not to react, but to respond, to be in my body more, and to feel the fear that's actually present underneath it, and just be with that like little inner girl that's in me that so badly wants the certainty. And can I soothe her, and can I be with her, and can I hear her? And then can I really give it to a higher power, to God, universe, source, whatever you want to call it, and trust that I'm taken care of.
Well, and what I'm hearing you say is you're taking care of you. You're showing up for yourself, even when you get triggered in the uncertainty. And that's really how you're able to navigate it. And that's your relationship. That's beautiful. So
thank you.
Why do you think it's hard for so many people? Actually, no, I had another question. When you were talking, I was like, oh, that's good. I want to go into, how do you know when you're in story? Because I think I've been having a lot of conversations with people recently, and it's like they don't recognize they're in story when they're in it. And it took me a while to even get out of this, but I'd love to hear from you, from your experience. How does somebody know when they're in a story?
Yeah. Well, you're in your head. You're in your mind, right? Like, what's your language look like? I should do this. I could do this. Oh, I'm giving reasons. I'm justifying, right? If you have to call 5 people and talk about it, you're in your story. Right. And so there are times, and here's the thing. It's not bad to do that. I have girlfriends that I call and talk to when I'm in my trigger, when I'm in the story, when I'm in, and there's times and places to process through the mind. right? And it's just like when we're talking about it, when we're giving reasons, when we're giving justifications, when we're trying to make sense of something. Say you go through a breakup and then, right, you go to therapy, you go to say talk therapy, which can be helpful, right? I'm not even hating on this. It's just, it's one facet of so many other things we can do to support ourselves. But say you go through a breakup and then you're talking about, well, you know, in my case, uh, he did this and this is what happened and then I did it. Like you're talking about the facts of what happened, and or you're in blame, or you're in shame of yourself, you're in I should have done this, like you're ruminating about the past or things that happened, you're anxious about the future. So honestly, if you're in the past or you're in the future, you're most likely in a story because you're not in the present moment.
Mhm.
And so it's all about looking at your language, and we operate in stories. That's how we make frames of our life. That's how we make sense of our life. However, what we're not taught to do is, what is the feeling that's underneath that story? If you get quiet and you breathe into this moment and you feel, what's the sensation I'm actually feeling in my body? And I do this with like students of mine where they want to like talk and ruminate on the problem, right? And but the second that we get quiet and I say, okay, can you breathe into what's underneath that? Right? The first thing that typically comes up is like grief or sadness or tears, or like there's something that's right underneath the story, the surface, that is begging to be felt, but that is being masked by the story, that's being masked by anger, that's being masked by blame. And when we actually get quiet enough to listen to what's underneath, that's what it looks like to really feel and process your emotions. People think that you're processing when you're talking about it all the time or when you have really big reactions to things. That's not actually what processing your emotions is getting quiet and quieting the mind and feeling what is inside of the body that actually is probably very historical and not just about this one event.
I've been asking,
Facts.
again, I've been asking people recently, and I'm in conversation, and I'm like, oh, so you've been working on this thing for a while. How long have you been working on it? And they're saying like years. I'm like, okay, so you've been working on building trust for years. What have you been doing? And I'm finding it's a lot of talking about it, or a lot of awareness about it, or a lot of like understanding attachment styles, or this thing about myself, or this thing about another person. And like you said, it's like actually, okay, so you get a mental grip on it, but the pattern's still showing up. And if that's a very clear sign that you're not actually working on the thing. So I absolutely love this. Where do you
Yeah.
feel shame comes into the picture here with this whole conversation? So I think shame's a big one that can stop people. It's definitely stopped me in a lot of ways and kept me in patterns. And I can speak from experience. I didn't even realize it was shame until hindsight.
Mm, yeah. I mean, shame is something that I think so many of us have from a very young age. And it's one of the densest feelings and emotions that we can feel because it comes with, there's so much stigma around it, right? It's like, it's normal to feel anger, and you can say that you feel angry, or you can say that you feel sad, but to say you feel shame, like hot shame that like comes over your body, and it's like, because shame comes often with a story of, I am bad, I am wrong, I am broken, I am not enough. And that roots back to when we're really, really young, and it can drive us. I mean, it was something that drove me for many years, and I didn't even know. And we can be running from our shame, running from our pain, running from the belief of I am not good enough. And what ends up happening is, I mean, I think it's really important to understand how shame is created and how adaptations of our personality are created to protect ourselves from that shame. Because if you can understand that about yourself, you basically can understand everything about your entire personality and how you've created things in your life. Because when we're little, right, we're all born whole, perfect, complete, beautiful. Like you look at a baby, that baby doesn't feel shame for screaming in the supermarket and embarrassing the parents, right? Doesn't feel shame for just like the baby just is. The baby just is expressed in whatever way feels right and true. And then we grow up and all of a sudden we're 2, 3, 4. We start to learn how we're supposed to be, how we're supposed to act. And I think I think this is changing now, but you know, people think, okay, well, I didn't have any really big T traumatic things that happened to me in my childhood. And this was something that I always thought, right? I thought I had this really amazing childhood with 2 incredible parents who were very in love. I was very fortunate, beautifully provided for. My trauma didn't happen until I was 16 years old when my dad died. So I always thought, when we're trained and when we go through this work, it's like, oh, from ages 0 to 7, that is when your entire framework for your life is created. And I'm sitting there going, but I had an amazing childhood. I didn't have my big trauma until I was 16 years old. And I thought that was where my my kind of downward spiral of 8 years before I got into this work, I thought that was what was the reason for it. That might have been the catalyst. But what I had locked down for so many years is that shame doesn't just come from these big T traumas. It comes from all of these little T trauma moments. It can come from not just the things that happened to us, but the things that didn't happen. And it can come from not getting our emotional needs met. It can come from like even just, a parent not validating our highly sensitive personality, which was certainly the case for me. And we can make that mean I'm bad, I'm wrong, I'm broken. And that can be something that happens over time and is insidious and isn't like, I have this one event that I remember when I was 5 years old and this happened and this is what created my shame. I personally don't have that. It was all of the little micro moments where I got kind of told inadvertently, not told directly, but through energy, through how my father responded to me, was I'm not good. I'm not good enough as I am. I have to be something that I'm not in order to receive love. And what ends up happening when whether we do have a specific moment or we have, something that was more like what happened to me, where it was just like kind of chipped away over time and we create adaptations of our personality. So we create these like protective mechanisms, whether that's I become a perfectionist or I become somebody that always procrastinates and doesn't actually like go for the thing that I want. I become somebody that needs to control, right? It's these parts of ourselves that we think are just our personality, or we think that these are just our self-sabotaging patterns. Well, really they're very intelligent mechanisms that are designed to keep our shame locked away. And yeah, working with those different parts of myself and then going back and feeling the shame that I never felt and grieving for that little girl. And I still am in that. I'm still in that process. And I don't know if that ever completes. I haven't found that to be true for me. But it's about tending to the parts of me that feel bad, wrong, broken, not good enough. And being with her and listening to her and then reparenting that part of myself by showing up for her in my adult being. And that's what it's looked like for me.
I love that. And I think, I don't know. Personally, I think just a lot of people, I've talking from, again, personal experience here too, but also observation, just run from those feelings or run from our little inner child, like by distracting, overworking, alcohol, whatever it is. When it's like, I don't think people really understand. Like, I want to highlight all the words that you're saying and like go back and listen to it again. I don't, because it's like what you're talking about is really freaking important to breaking patterns, to showing up differently in life. And, I found that when if y'all were to apply what she's talking about here, like what shows up for you changes, what you're attracted to shifts. It's just the laws of quantum physics, and because you're operating at a different frequency, because you're more in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of want to shift gears because we've been talking a lot about the inner work, and it's kind of where we started, which I love. It's a lot of the circles that we are in, the work that we do. What's your take on dating and relationship stuff, the culture of it right now? What do you have to say to women, and what do you have to say to men? What's your perspective on things? I would just love to pick your brain on that.
I love this. No one ever asked me this because I'm not technically a dating or relationship coach. And I will say I am no expert in this, but I'll give you my take on it. And I've been in a lot of like intimacy and polarity workshop spaces, and I've gotten really into being in my feminine over the last, I would say solid year and a half. I've been really deep in that work because I was very like masculine, prove myself, hustle, what can I achieve? And I believed that my worthiness came from my achievements, and that was what I would lead with, but it was a mask, right? So we talk about the adaptations that, right, the part of me that didn't feel good enough felt like I had to mask myself with, here's my achievements, here's why I'm so great, here's why you should love me, right? And got really into this feminine embodiment, being in the feeling, learning feminine communication. And it's been really powerful for me in my relationships with men, in general, not just romantic relationships, and understanding, how to communicate and how to lead from my desire, how to be connected into my desire. And I think all of that is amazing. And what I will say is that I think that there is this rigidity inside of, especially the polarity spaces, right? The masculine is supposed to be this, leader, provider, set the container, and then the feminine is supposed to follow and be flowy and be relaxed. And what I found for me is, I think that, and I don't speak for everyone here, I understand the return to those dynamics. And that's actually something that I desire in my own romantic partnership, is to have a bit more of a traditional, like, I love having a masculine man that wants to provide and wants to lead and all of these things, right? But I think that we get to also create room for nuance, because what I've seen in myself, and I'll speak for myself and also some of my friends that I've spoken with, right? There's this idea inside of the masculine, feminine polarity teachings that the woman is just supposed to like follow, and she doesn't, masculine men don't want a woman that actually wants to work because they want someone that's soft. And there's like all these ideas, right? And going back to what I said at the beginning, which is we're supposed to fit, like, it's this idea of like, I'm supposed to fit in a box. Mm-hmm. And what I found for me, and what I come back home to in relationship and in myself, is that what is my gift to a partner? My gift to my partner is my aliveness. And my aliveness comes from so then I look at, okay, what is my aliveness generated from? And how can I cultivate and do more of that? Right? Because we want to be in partnerships where we're each individually working on ourselves. We each know what it is that we need. We each know what creates aliveness for ourselves, and how do we then cultivate that and then bring that into a relationship. And I certainly do not always get this perfect, let me tell you. But when you look at these polarity teachings, and what I fell into was, okay, now I really want to be in my feminine. I want a relationship like this. So therefore, I actually was like, started to question, should I not do my business? Like, should and notice going into the shoulds, right? Of like, into the story, like what's right. What is going to be right to make me feel fulfilled in a relationship?
Well, that's still the same voice
and
name talking
for me. Yeah. Right. It was another trap, another like fall, like this is the box that I have to fit in order to have this fulfilling relationship. And again, it's like putting it outside of yourself, right? And it's just so nuanced here that I think they're great frameworks. I think that it's beautiful that we have these teachings and we have reference points. But when we really tap in, and this is going to be different for every single person, but for me, when I started to follow these teachings so verbatim, I was like, oh, I shouldn't want to work. And then it just totally took me out of my power. I'm like, no, what brings me alive is being in my purpose. It's learning, it's growing. It's, I love coaching people. I love witnessing their transformation. I love doing this work on myself. I love being, in my own autonomy with making my own money and make it like, right. And so what I've landed on as being in my feminine for me is not what I do, but it's how I do it. And it's how do I cultivate the aliveness within myself, and how do I give that gift in a relationship with another person? And if I'm not in my aliveness, what is that and why? And then what do I need to recalibrate within myself to bring that forth again?
I absolutely love that. It's because then you're not in a framework. It's just what makes you come alive and is most authentic to
Mm-hmm.
yourself. And you're showing up as your authentic self instead of what you think you need to be in
Yeah.
order to. Ah, I love it. Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot of that here. And I'll even say it's hot sometimes when a woman leads, and I'm like, yes, ma'am. Okay, damn. So like that, it's can you go there? I find it
Right.
hot sometimes. Sometimes, and most of the time, I like to lead because I'm more of a masculine pole. But I can switch into my feminine, and I can follow.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, I would say I am more feminine
Yeah.
oriented most of the time in my aliveness with the art that I do and create and the poetry that I write. Like that's more erotic. You could call it feminine, but
Mm-hmm.
drop the labels makes me come alive. It's authentic to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I absolutely
Yeah.
love that frame. Um, and I guess you're recommending that just for everybody of come back to what's alive for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And come into your own inner union. That's something that I'm really working on. And to your point, Kevin, right? It's like, you're like, oh, I have these feminine, like this qualities within me that are creative and artistic. And then I also really like to lead and be in my masculine. And to your point, it's that we all have feminine and masculine energies within us. Right. And if we aren't working on cultivating both of those, then we actually are leaving half of the piece of the puzzle of ourselves and our truth out of the equation. And so when I leaned so hard into my feminine, it's like I forgot the masculine pole of my own discipline, my own, like structure that I was creating for myself that I did for so long, for so many years. It was like I completely swung the pendulum in the opposite direction. And I think a lot of times that we get to do that in our lives so that we get to, again, find the balance and find the center. But I think what I would say for anybody listening to this is cultivating your own inner union. What part of you have you repressed, or have you forgotten about, or have you not um, focused on? So if you find yourself that you're like feminine and constantly blowing in the wind, like, can you bring out your own inner masculine and create structure, create discipline, create processes for yourself, for your feminine to thrive? If you are so hyper masculine and you find yourself shut out of your emotions, how can you learn how to be in your body and feel a bit more? How can you relax into that and feel into your feminine? So I think it's really about creating inner union first. And I'm still very much on that journey.
Same. It's a lifelong
Yeah.
process for sure. There's no destination there. I have a hypothesis, and I'd love to hear your opinion on it, that a partner can't do what you don't have within yourself. So they can expand
Mm-hmm.
things, but if I was so cut off from my feminine part and didn't have access to my emotions, I have to be the one to initiate it myself to go there, and then having a partner who might inspire that in me or whatever, then it can really amplify and I can dive in. And and then that's where like partners can support each other. But I think for a lot of
Yeah.
people, they try to get their partner to crack into that thing instead of like, well, it has to be their own initiation and their own, like, I'm going to start doing this inwardly. And then you can lean in and support and do all the things that you're desiring. So I love that with the inner union
Yeah.
frame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it has to come from within, right? It has to. We can't, nobody can fill within ourselves what we're not cultivating, what we're not bringing forth, what we're not working on within ourselves. And it also has to be driven from within as well. Like if a partner comes to you and is like, you should work on this, what's the immediate thing that's going to come up is the defense pattern. Right. Because then we go back into the shame of I'm wrong, bad, broken, I'm not good enough. So therefore I'm going to defend. Right. And that's not a way to inspire. And instead it's like that's why I think it's so important that we are doing the work on ourselves, that we are like looking at, okay, what parts of me do I want to bring forward, or what is it that I need to work on, where are my patterns, what's arising. And how do I feel what like if you look back at your last relationship or if you look at your current relationship now, it's what am I trying to source from my partner that I'm not giving myself? And how do I begin to source that for myself here and now? A partner can absolutely mirror back to us. They can mirror to us, they can expand us, they can support us, they can inspire us, but it has to be driven from within. And also, we have to be filling ourselves from the inside out. And I think that's really what everybody actually wants at the end of the day.
I would agree. Yeah, most definitely.
Even if they don't know it, even if it's unconscious, but I think like that's the actual true fulfillment that we're looking for, right? It's like not getting fulfilled in another person, but how do I fill myself from the inside out?
hmm hmm And there is the and I want to share that with somebody else component as well tied in there. I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. But
And
rather than sourcing it from them, right? It's like
right,
how
right.
do we cultivate this and bring this as two individuals and to come together and then amplify that?
Mhm.
And I think that's yeah. I mean, we're relational beings. Of course, we want that.
Exactly.
And if we're sourcing it from somebody else and expecting them to fill it, that's a recipe for um it's just that's never goes well.
So don't do that. Yeah,
No shame, we all do it. We've
yeah,
all done it.
yeah. Been there, done that. Got the t-shirt.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
yeah. Well, I'm loving where this is at. I mean, what's alive for you right now? Where is it that you are exploring for yourself?
I love that question. I feel like I'm always exploring so many things. For me, the piece on aliveness is really what I'm working on cultivating in the micro moments for myself. And so, how can I beautify my life? Like, what is it that I desire in my life? And how can I create more of that in the micro moments? So, um, what that looks like for me right now is like, even down to when I'm waking up in the morning, what are the things that I'm doing to really nourish my body or to take a few more moments of myself? What's going to make me feel most alive today? How can I love the workout classes that I'm doing and moving my body? Like I'm really looking at micro moments of aliveness and how do I expand those in my everyday? Because I think it can be so easy to go through the motions, and especially if you run a business or we're all busy, right? We all have like so much going on, and I think it can be really easy to just like go through the motions, go through the process, allow it to be mundane, allow it to be bored, like and just kind of go through our days. And so what I'm really working on is bringing in intentional aliveness, bringing intentional feeling, slowing down a little bit, and um, looking at how I can make my life just 1% more desirable in every moment, and slowing down enough to look at what's around me and be with it and be with what I've created, and have so much gratitude for it. I think I've gone through ebbs and flows in my life of getting really busy and then missing the moment. And so I'm really working on slowing down and being with it, and being with everything, the whole range of the human experience and emotions. Um, yeah, I'd say that's what's most alive for me now.
I love that. Alive for aliveness, I would say, is what kind of how you answered that, which is beautiful.
Mhm.
I can relate a
Yeah.
lot to that, going the hyper masculine route and
Yeah.
just bulldozing through your day. And you can still have a full
Yeah.
schedule and be in the micro moments and full of aliveness. Like it's literally you can dance through it instead of just bulldozing through it. And I'm learning the exact same thing right now. So I see you.
I love that.
Mm.
It's always a good reminder, you know? It's like I learn it and then I forget it. And then I learn it and then I forget it.
That's
So I gotta consistently bring myself back to it as a
yeah,
practice.
definitely. So you've been doing this work for a while now, and you are,
Mhm.
quite masterful at what you do. So for everybody listening and tuning in,
Thank
definitely
you.
check out our work. It'll be in the show notes below, and I want you to share a little bit more about what you got coming up. But um, how like when you are, I guess who comes to you for support most of the time? Who's your
Yeah.
ideal?
So I love this. My ideal client. It ranges. I work with women. I do work one-on-one with some men, but primarily all of my group programs and my retreats are all women. And it's women who want more for their life. I take people through a six-part process that in my group program that we have going on right now. And if they want to get on the wait list for the next round, we've had about 100 people go through it this year so far. And it's a six-part process of teaching people how to regulate their nervous system, get into their feeling, get into their body, get into their feminine. And yeah, it's called, I can tell you the 6 steps. It's regulate, release. So learning how to actually release and feel and process your emotions, reparent, learning how to reparent yourself, and reparent the inner child parts of you. Rewire, which is where most of the teachings start in the typical self-development, which is like rewire your subconscious mind. I'm like, well, if your nervous system is dysregulated, babe, like you can try to do all the rewiring that you want. But so we work a lot with the body. And then we go into rewire the belief systems, repatterning the body to expand your capacity for what you can hold. And then rise, which is all about relationship with trust, surrender, and devotion, which I know we touched on at the beginning. And so women come to me all ages. I have people from 20 to in their 60s that come and do this work with me. And it's all somatic embodiment, feminine embodiment work. And it's about learning how to create safety in your body, learning how to feel and process your emotions. It's a whole process that once you learn all 6 steps, you can kind of like weave in and out of what it is that you need, and all somatic embodiment tools. And yeah, basically taking yourself out of a state of chronic fight, flight, freeze, and being able to recognize your pattern, recognize those adaptations that have been created in your life that might be running your life and self-sabotaging you from what you really want, and learning how to actually shift those patterns from the inside out. And it's the greatest work of my life and joy of my life to be able to do this. And it's been a culmination of almost 7 years of studying all of this work. And that's what that has been born out of. And it's been really epic and beautiful. So we're running an 8-week program right now. And I have a retreat coming up for women that's going to be here in Austin, Texas in 3 weeks. Really beautiful, intimate, doing this work in a closed container for 3 to 4 days. And it's really for the woman who desires more for her life. Like if you have the story of, I know that I have so much potential. I'm so self-aware. I've done so much work on myself, and yet I still feel stuck. That's when people come to me. It's like, I've done all the self-development stuff, and yet I still feel powerless to these patterns. And why am I not where I, thought that I was going to be? Or, why doesn't my life, why do I have all the things, but my life doesn't feel like I thought it would? It doesn't feel as good as it looks. And I work with people to understand why that is and how to shift that.
Well, all that will be in the show notes down below. Rachel, thank you so much for being on the show. This was a lovely, amazing, alive conversation, and I took notes. Fuck. So I hope other people did too.
Kevin, thank you so much for having me.
Very welcome.